In this episode, we speak with Elizabeth Betten, partner and co-head of healthcare at Madison Dearborn Partners. Elizabeth was recognized by GrowthCap as a top woman leader in growth investing of 2024. Madison Dearborn has a history in Chicago that dates back to the early 1980s when its founders built a $2.6 billion management buyout and venture capital portfolio at First Chicago Venture Capital. In 1992, the founders established MDP as an independent firm, and since then, the firm has raised aggregate capital of over $31 billion and has completed investments in more than 160 companies. Elizabeth joined MDP in 2004 as an associate and rejoined after business school in 2008. Prior to MDP, she worked in healthcare investment banking at JP Morgan. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to follow.
RJ Lumba is the managing partner of GrowthCap and the executive chairman of Market Insight Media. He is the host of Growth Investor, a podcast featuring today's best investors, executives, and founders. In the minutes ahead, we'll uncover insights and strategies for accelerating growth and succeeding in business.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's a delight to be with you.
No, thank you so much, RJ. Appreciate it.
So Madison Dearborn is a storied name in the private equity industry. For the benefit of our audience, I thought perhaps you could kick us off with kind of the background of the firm, the history, maybe those early days which set up the foundation for what was to come.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a fun story. So Madison Dearborn Partners was founded by a group of folks who were doing principal investing as part of First Chicago Venture Capital, really over 30 years ago now. And in 1992, that group spun out of the bank and moved across the street and founded Madison Dearborn Partners, which is really named for the true major cross streets in Chicago. And, I think it was incredibly important to the partners at the firm that no one's name was on the door, that the firm was really founded in partnership. And so we like to joke, our landlord certainly has the upper hand on us because this is where our office is. This is still where I'm sitting today, is on those two cross streets. But I think it really has had real meaning to us, and feeling like that feeling of partnership has really permeated the firm over those 30 years. And that's really a little bit about the history of the firm's founding.
It's very difficult for a firm in the investment business to continue to succeed over time and perform well. Madison Dearborn has done that. Could you tell us a little bit about maybe how the firm has in some ways stayed the same and in other ways evolved?
No, absolutely. I think it's come down to really three things that I think has really benefited our firm. The first is really going back to that founding and having a philosophy of having industry focus areas and having investment professionals focus in those different industries. And so, if you think back to the early 90s, private equity was in its infancy and many folks were generalist investors, but we always had that philosophy of having professionals focus on a particular industry. And so healthcare, the industry that I focus on, has been a mainstay at the firm, really going back beyond the 30 years that the firm's been around. And so a lot of this is really having that culture of having really deep industry expertise, right? Where there are certain subsectors where we are known for having real insight and industry relationships and deal experience and track record. And so the first is just that really, really deep industry experience. The second really goes to that culture of partnership and just being really trusted partners in our ecosystem. And so, that does help us find really unique opportunities where founders or selling shareholders may be looking for opportunities where, yes, they're looking for some liquidity now, but they also may be as focused on what we could do together and really building that company for that next turn. And so I would say that leads us to some pretty interesting opportunities. But it also means that we've built longstanding relationships with our lenders and credit partners, and importantly, our limited partners, many of whom have been longstanding partners to our firm. And the third is investing in our people here at MDP, right? And, building teams that have diverse perspectives, that have that culture of partnership where we can have direct and candid debates, and having a culture of apprenticeship. I joined the firm, 20 years ago in 2004 as a, young entry-level associate. I actually went back to business school at Stanford, which I was born and raised in Northern California. And there was a part of me that was like, should I stay in California? But I really came back to MDP because I felt that level of support and where people were going to take me under their wing and develop me. And now as one of the leaders of the firm, like I really feel that it's my obligation to do the same. And, I think that culture, ability to develop young talent is really what's led to our continued success.
Yeah, I'm always interested in these firms where they're able to bring folks in fairly early in their career and then send them off to business school, help them get into some of the premier business schools, and then to be able to recruit them back. So obviously, Madison Dearborn is doing something well. Can you tell us a little bit more about the culture and what it is that enables the firm to keep its talent?
I think it really does come down to that level of everybody feeling like they're a part of the team and inclusivity. And, even when we recruit our associates, part of our pitch to them is, look, we're looking into our crystal ball and trying to see if we see potential in you to be a future leader in the firm. And there's obviously a tremendous amount of development along the way, but do those folks have the intellectual curiosity, the emotional quotient, the just desire to strive and win, and then a culture of being humble about any success that you do have. And that's really what I think's been able to us both recruit really good talent, develop them early, hopefully, to your point, send them to a great business school, and then ultimately get really fantastic talent to return back. I mean, it is kind of fascinating. A number of our deal doing partners were prior MDP associates, which is pretty phenomenal when you think about it.
Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to succeed in the private equity world. The whole process from learning the trade and then being able to then be a trusted partner to CEOs and then to have great outcomes for the company in the long term, as well as financial return for your limited partners. What would you point your success towards if there were one or two things that has
Yeah.
enabled you to perform well?
I think it really comes down to a couple of things. One, I focus in healthcare, and I'll be honest, I've always had a passion for the sector, right? And so I think that leads to just really being wanting to be a student of the industry and making sure that I really understood truly how our healthcare system, which is, complex and leads to a lot of odd externalities, and that sometimes leads to challenges and sometimes leads to opportunities, and really being able to dissect those in an interesting way and engage in constructive debate on that with, both new deal opportunities as well as our existing portfolio companies. So I think part of my success is being, known as a trusted thought partner to our CEOs as they think through different challenges and opportunities in their business and what does that mean for the overall industry landscape. And so I do think that's been a big part of my success. The second is, I think it is about being a good partner. And so how do you operate in those times where there are challenges and trying to find creative solutions to work together, and also in areas of opportunity, and how do we really lean into those and make sure that we're driving forward? And, private equity, the role as a sort of lead deal partner in a private equity deal is always an interesting one, especially with our CEO partners, right? It's in part consigliere, it's in part partner, it's in part, there are times where you're pushing your CEO forward or trying to influence them in different ways. And I think finding that right balance between those three is really critical.
Maybe to make this more tangible to our listeners, could you point to maybe an example of how you worked with a CEO or management team to truly help the company? Maybe it was having a difficult time. Maybe things were going well and you're just figuring out how to expand faster or more efficiently. But yeah, maybe an example that you tend to like to share.
Look, so much of success, and I think success for our portfolio companies and our CEOs really comes down to talent. So this is the area that I spend the most amount of time with our companies on, one, obviously making sure we have the right CEOs in the seat, but beyond that, and this is an area I personally lean into a lot, in part because I really enjoy it, and in part because I think it makes a tremendous difference. You can have a fantastic company in a great sector, and if you don't have the right people in the right seats, you may not be able to execute on the full potential of the opportunity. And so I spend a tremendous amount of time with our CEOs thinking about their organizational structure and whether we have the right talent to scale. And I have a great partner in that, in Chris Trendler, who is our head of portfolio talent, who has a background in organizational behavior. But in one of our recent investments in Savita, we recently hired a new CEO there a little over a year and a half ago, Phil Kaufman, who was a veteran out of United Optum, and have really worked side by side with Phil to build his executive team and frankly also add to his board, right? And so, with a 40,000 person workforce there, human capital is just paramount. And so we've really focused on, how we continue to be an employer of choice. We recently hired a new chief human resources officer there who brings a lot of expertise with unique experiences from even outside of healthcare. And so working with Phil to make sure that, we really get the right leader in that seat. As we thought about board positions as well, we recruited Kenny Gardner, who is an operator and the former chief people officer of DaVita. So just that continued focus on people and building strong and inclusive teams is really an area that we focused on. But, that's one example. We also recruited a new chief financial officer there, but I could give you a variety of different examples really across our entire portfolio. And I do think that's an area where we think about talent all the time. And so I think that's an area where we can really be helpful in both evaluating talent, using our network, and really helping our CEOs build best-in-class teams.
When you think about the healthcare sector as a whole, many different investment firms have a healthcare arm or they focus on it, in a major way. How would you kind of distinguish the areas of healthcare that Madison Dearborn focuses on versus others who are playing in different areas?
It's a really good question. And our healthcare mandate is relatively broad. I co-lead the team with my partner, Jason Scheidler. And so we split up the landscape a bit between healthcare services, and Jason covers medical products and equipment and pharma services and distribution. But within each of those, to your point, like there has to be real power alleys where you have real strength. And so in healthcare services, where we've spent the vast majority of our time is really in areas where there's patient preferred settings, lower cost at the same or better levels of quality. And so that's led us to be really active in home and community-based care. We've had a variety of different investments over the last 20 years. We have 2 or 3 investments currently in our portfolio that have home and community-based care focus areas. The other area that we like to spend a lot of time in is in areas where there's supply and demand imbalances or real access to care issues. And we see a number of types of those opportunities in behavioral health. And one of our portfolio, actually a couple of our portfolio companies have behavioral health assets within them, but that's an area where we continue to spend a tremendous amount of time. And then we are also looking at areas where we can drive efficiency of scale, especially as a result of outsourcing specialized workflow. And so that could be revenue cycle management for providers or a variety of services to insurance companies and other payers. I would say the area we probably don't spend as much time on as a healthcare services investor is in what people would say is sort of the physician practice management space. There are some unique areas in that we like, but I would say that has been an area of a lot of investment. And generally speaking, I would say we've been a little bit more bearish on some of those opportunities, just I think doing it at a very large scale and at our scale, where we're generally trying to take companies from small to medium to real market leaders. And I think in that part of the ecosystem, it's just harder to manage some of those businesses at scale versus other businesses that may be a little bit more on the ancillary services side of the world.
Mm-hmm. One of the topics we like to highlight at GrowthCap is women's leadership in investing. That includes private equity and growth equity. Would love to hear about kind of your thoughts, maybe insights to others in the industry, other women in the industry, on maybe things to be mindful of and maybe how to succeed in the private equity world.
Absolutely. Look, it's a real passion of mine. Just did a session at my children's school to some high schoolers who had started a females in finance club. And my view is the earlier we can catch them, the better, because the more we can have folks appreciate sort of how multidimensional finance can be, and especially private equity or growth investing can be, and such an interesting and dynamic career that I feel incredibly lucky to have, ultimately fallen into and been successful in. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about how we can both get more women into the industry and keep more women progressing in the industry. And, most of the advice that I give to folks is really there's no reason you can't be incredibly successful. And there are challenges at times about being at times the only woman in a room or in a meeting, but you have to also flip it on its head and realize that can also be an advantage. If you are really clear about your expertise and what you can bring to the table and knowledgeable about the topic that's being covered, the reality is that people will remember you. You stick out, which maybe some people see as a negative, but I'd like to turn on its head and see it as a positive. And so I've tried to use that to my advantage in many situations. And I think in today's world, I've found ability to connect with both men and women CEOs and founders in a way that many times I think my male counterparts couldn't. And so I think there's every opportunity to be successful. You may have a different style than some of your male counterparts, but that doesn't mean it's no less effective. If you can believe in yourself, there's every opportunity ahead of you.
And it sounds like you've been able to balance out being a parent in addition to career. Any insights to share on that front?
Yeah. Look, I think the good news in today's environment is that everybody wants to be an active and engaged parent, right? And so, in some ways, I think I felt very lucky that Madison Dearborn Partners was always a very family centric firm. And so, my male counterparts want to go to parent teacher conferences just as much as I do. And so there was never any distinction between my involvement in my kids' activities versus theirs. I do think you have to be comfortable having help. And my big advice to any young parents, whether male or female, is to really focus on the things that you care about. One of the really nice things about a career in finance is that you do have resources that you can use to help take care of a lot of the things that you don't want to necessarily spend your free time on, and use your free time as much as you can spending time with family or friends. And, you can devote the rest of it to, trying to be as successful as you can at work. So I have 2 daughters, 10 and 13. And, I try to be there for them as much as I can. But at the same time, I think, they really also like seeing me succeed at work as well.
Excellent. Last 2 questions. Can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
So I think it's hard not to break it into 2. And, there is no doubt from a professional perspective, the person that's had the biggest influence on my career is my mentor, Tim Sullivan, who was one of the founders of MDP and the leader of the healthcare team for over 25 years. We worked together for 20 years, and it was really Tim who developed me as an investor. And he believed in me and my talents, convinced me to come back to MDP, and really taught me the business. My view is this is an apprenticeship business, and he really took that model with me. And so how to think about investing and opportunity and risk, how to work with management teams, how to think about board governance. I just feel incredibly lucky because I really learned from one of the best, and I just owe him a tremendous amount. I think the other, from more of a personal perspective, it would be my mom. She was an attorney and worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office, really at a time when there weren't as many women in those roles, and went on to be a lead partner of her own firm. And so she was a significant role model for me, and, allowed me to see that you can be ambitious and lean into your career while also being, an incredible and supportive mother. I was sort of thinking about this topic the other day, and my daughter actually said to me, I think I should be the most influential person to you. And in some ways, that's true, right? Because much of my goals in life is to make sure that I can be that same role model to my daughters as my mother was to me.
Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
Yeah. So one of the things I really love most about living in Chicago is there actually is a very significant culture of civic engagement. And there are a few things that I'm really passionate about within our city. The first is children's healthcare. And obviously, as I've said, I focus on healthcare, and that's a passion of mine. And, I'm very actively involved in the Children's Hospital here in Chicago, especially with regards to its research entity, which is the Stanley Manley Children's Research Institute. The reality is children's research, because it is a bit of a smaller market, is chronically underfunded. And yet children are our world's future. And, if we don't save or improve their lives, then, they obviously go on to not be adults or have adults with significant issues. And so the Stanley Manley Children's Research Institute has done some amazing things and has made some incredible strides over the last 10 years of really expanding that enterprise and doing much more sophisticated research and clinical trials and other things that would fundamentally change the lives of so many children struggling with diseases. The other area that we like to support, both my husband and I, is the Lincoln Park Zoo, which is actually a free zoo in Chicago. And so it just allows for so much inclusivity and ability for families of all demographics to enjoy experiential learning and, learning about nature and conservation. And I just think it is a really incredible asset to be able to have anyone in the city take their family and have that kind of experience without paying anything. And so we really love supporting that as well.
Excellent. Well, Elizabeth, I want to thank you again for taking the time to chat with us. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, RJ. Appreciate the time.